right maybe or undervalue, like when you see some paper, usual questions, at least for me, are how much work has been put into that paper? Whom she or he who did that paper left her or his child with while she was doing the experiment? His supervisor, was he supportive or unhelpful or abusive and despotic, and so on and so forth. So let me introduce our guests in this discussion. And okay, I have to begin with regret that Professor Jocelyn Burnell couldn't make it to this discussion. Her flight was delayed. She will give her talk tomorrow, but she unfortunately is not able to come today. But our first guest is Kishan Dholakia. Am I correct? I'm sorry. He's professor at University of St. Andrews and head of optical manipulation group in School of Physics and Astronomy. He is also a fellow of International Society of Optics and Photonics, also Optical Society of America. And he gave a beautiful speech today, and we all already know that his main topic and interest is in manipulating matter with light and imaging of biological objects, tissues, how to see into the living person without killing him or her. Our next guest is Linas Vilčiauskas. He's a senior researcher at the Center of Physical Sciences and Technology. And he graduated first from Vilnius University. He is a chemist, but then he had his share of travels throughout all the world. He's been to Germany. He did his PhD in Germany, then he did a postdoc in United States at several universities. But as I understood, he discovered what was the best in United States, married her, and convinced to come here. So now we have two brilliant scientists instead of one. And our third guest is Akvilė Zabiliūtė. She is 5 minutes to PhD. After? I'm very sorry. I was wondering a lot. Is it yet or, okay, I'm sorry. She's very young PhD, 5 minutes like doctor, yes, okay, sorry. She's a doctor. And she works as a researcher at Vilnius University, also in the center. She's young mom. She has like Kostas 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Okay, 4 years Kostas. So, I was wondering how to begin this discussion, and my first question to our guests and to maybe all of you, I imagine the format it will be like following. I'll ask, you will present your ideas, and others are very welcome to join with their ideas or concerns. So the first question, maybe we have to begin, we're talking about scientific career. So when you decided to follow that career, how did you imagine the life of scientists? How did you imagine what will you do? What will be your, what your life will look like? Can you tell?
Good evening, everyone. So to answer to this question, probably I thought that the the life of a scientist is very versatile and interesting, and you always get to know to many young people, like students, and also you always find something new, and every day is interesting. I've imagined it also to be like to spend lots of time in the lab. However, it's usually a bit less time due to this bureaucracy and filling grants and stuff. But however, I'm happy that I still get to spend some time in the lab. And it's, of course, also related a lot to traveling. So that's like, because scientists have to travel, they like internships or conferences or, yeah, many other stuff like meetings and abroad. So I imagine that it's a very interesting life, and yeah, now I think that it is true.
Hi everyone. That's a good question. Probably, first of all, I had no idea what the life of a scientist was when I was a kid and before I started studying, because nobody in my family was a scientist, nobody was related to science or anything. So the only impression I had was from the books and movies, probably. And probably I would start by saying that I didn't imagine a lot of things what a scientist does. And probably I didn't understand a lot of things like that you have to travel, even things like that you have a supervisor. Always imagine that, you are like a free artist. Nobody has a supervisor, nobody has to do any bureaucracy, nobody has to write papers or grants. That was my impression, of course. As you can imagine, all that view collapsed when I really had to start doing all those things, starting from having a supervisor and writing a paper. So yeah, my imagination was very different from reality, I can say.
So I think sometimes people don't really think what their life is going to be like. They just spontaneously decide if they're going to be happy. You can hear me now, yes. So maybe I can just give you a bit of a background. So when I left university, I left science completely. I earned a lot of money in a bank, a lot of money. And I worked in London, and I had a lot of money, I had a lot of friends, I had a great time, but I was really unhappy. And so I left. I left the bank, and my parents were really unhappy that I left because they'd come from India and they were pretty poor. And so they thought, this is fantastic. I got this amazing job, selected out thousands of people. They selected in the city of London, something like 50 people. And I was one of them. So I was like, wow. But I was really unhappy. And the reason I was unhappy was because I couldn't be creative. So I just decided I wanted a life where I could be creative. So everything I would suggest or think about, they said, no, you can't do that, you can't do this. And then someone said to me, oh, your life will be like this in 5 years, you'll have children, mortgages, then you'll never leave, because you're trapped, right? Life has a way of trapping everybody, right? You get trapped in something. And I thought, I'm going to get trapped, but I don't want to be trapped in this. So I decided to leave, and I took like a 90% pay cut, which is a very tough thing to do. So avoid that if you can. But anyway, ultimately I just decided to be happy, right? And so I didn't even want to be a scientist. I thought I would do industry. And then I thought I could maybe work in industry. I enjoyed light. But then what really got me interested in life as a scientist is a supervisor. In life we need role models. Whatever age you are, you kind of think, I kind of like that person's lifestyle. I kind of like what they're doing. I think I could do that. I would like to do that. Maybe you look to your supervisor, your friends, maybe somebody on television. I don't know. And so my supervisor was a really cool guy. He was like top of his year at Oxford. He was much brighter than me. And he was always challenging me, and it was being fun. And I thought, this is great, right? And again, I didn't decide it on, of course, all these things are important. When I did my PhD, I only went to 2 conferences in my 3 years. Now my group, they go 1 conference a month, it seems to me, some of them. It's great people are traveling. I didn't know there was so much traveling. I didn't know there was so much email to answer. I didn't know there was so much bureaucracy and science. But the thing that inspires me for the life is the creativity. You know, there's 6 billion people on the planet. Everybody is individual. Science is a way to feel individual. You know, it's a passion. It's like a paid hobby. When you say the life, I feel like, hey, it's so cool. I can wake up, I can do something fun. I'm even being paid a little bit for it, right? And I've got a grant, but it's great. Someone around the world says, hey, I like that. Send me the paper. Can I visit your lab? Can my student come and visit? Or whatever it is. I love that. That's what makes me excited, because I can do something maybe nobody else has done before. And that's what I really love about the life of a scientist, to be individual.
Sorry, 6 was 20 years ago, now 7.5 billion.
Yeah. Sorry? It's about 8 already.
7.5, 6 was
Billion
Oh, right, okay, right. Well, there you go. So that's even more reason to another 1.5 billion reasons. Okay, thank you for that.
Okay. We are going too positive already. It's not good.
Oh, you want to see the bad?
No. As I see, okay, you all had some unexpected sides of science, and you already mentioned bureaucracy. I believe everyone who at least once met this thing in life, they hate it. It cannot be otherwise. But may I ask a different question? Now, we all are on very different, let's say, stages of our scientific career. Can you think of the biggest disappointment in science? Some aspect which caused you the biggest disappointment, I don't know, grief? Or are you absolutely happy with your choice?
I think most of the disappointments for a scientist come from the fact when you read a paper in Science or Nature and you think, oh, I thought about that a couple of years ago, you know, why didn't I do that? Happens quite often. Probably the disappointments come and go quite often, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe also this that mentioned also disappointment is lots of bureaucracy, like you have to fill in many papers, and when you have to do simple stuff and just it happens sometimes that you need very simple things like to get particular glue or something, and you have to fill in form, wait for it, like for the to get it when it's bought, and you just cannot go and do stuff easily. And also when you have to write applications, and then also like write it again and again and the same, and this part is quite boring, quite disappointing for me.
So that's an interesting question. What is a big disappointment? So you're right, we have to do lots of, to be creative. I grew up in the lab, and I love being in the lab, being at the computer, solving something, and now 90%, 95% of my time is doing other things. But I still live for those moments. But I also think in life, you know, we focus on the success, but it's overcoming the disappointments that makes the success better. So if you go and see a view from a mountain, if someone takes you on the helicopter, you're at the top and you say, oh, that's a nice view. But if you have to climb the mountain and spend the whole day and maybe fall or something a little bit, or it rains or something like that, the view is even more pleasing. All right, so many philosophers say that. So in a way, I think you should overcome disappointment. That will give you your biggest sense of achievement in life. So overcoming the disappointment is important. For me, the biggest disappointment sometimes is people in my group who are there, but they don't really have found their passion, you know? That is a disappointment. So I want people who really buy into a creativity idea. You know, it's fine if it's not for you, it's okay. But my disappointment is people who do it, but are not really, I can see they're not being what I would call congruent. In other words, they're not really finding what their passion is and the excitement, because it's a lot of energy for everybody else in a group. Maybe you've been, just like anything in life, you're in a team, you want to do something great. I come into the lab and say, guys, we've got to do this. Many of the results we have done, each of them has a story behind it. Like you were starting at the beginning, the paper is a story of maybe childcare, family commitments, things going wrong. And I'm disappointed when people say, I like people who are passionate. I'd rather have someone who's passionate and didn't have all the knowledge than someone who's just doing it to tick a box. So my disappointment is sometimes having people who are not really buying in or really wanting to do something. I just want people around me who want to be excited and wanting to do things, because that's how great things happen in life, personal and career.
That's a very interesting point, because many in the audience, they are about to make this decision, to go to science, to stay in science, or to go somewhere else. To the bank. One of our colleagues went to the bank, by the way, after finishing PhD. And the question is, I am sure that there are those who are not quite sure what to decide. They are not too passionate about science, but okay, maybe yes, maybe not. What would be your suggestion to them what to do? To stay in science, to try it out? Or if you feel that you are not too passionate, better not?
Well, I think certainly many of the people are, so just like I tried the bank, you can try things. Don't be scared to try, and then, now I never think about going back to the bank or doing anything in finance or something else. I'm very happy. But it's easy for us to sit here and say, this is great. But the best thing in life is field experience. Unless you yourself go through something in life, you will not understand how good or bad that was for you. That is full stop. So if you feel, I want to go to the bank, I want to be a pilot, I want to do teaching, whatever it is, and you really feel it, do it. It's okay. You've got a chance at your point in life to make, not a mistake, but we have to go through many wrongs to get to the right. You don't usually just end up in the right thing and everything else is gone, because there's more and more choice in this world. Everybody now has more and more choice in career. So, but I would say, be true to yourself. Ask yourself, if I wake up in 3 years, or 5 years, will I be unhappy with this life? Am I feeling that? Or do I wake up every day and think, I really want to have another go at this, or my job, or my career? If that's what you feel like, and I did with science, then science is for you. It may not be that. It may be something else. But that's the kind of thing you want to find.
Thank you. Also, I wanted to ask a question. You mentioned about those nice science and nature papers you didn't publish. And usually, at least for me, it is like, okay, I see something strange. I think that some interesting physics might be behind that, but I am simply afraid to publish it, to tell it. How do you overcome that? Do you? What is the recipe? What to publish? Very nice story, in fact, was of Professor Jocelyn. She had really great bravery to stand for her result. I just remind you that she noticed very weak signal in her data. She was just a PhD student at that time, and her supervisor said that it's nonsense, it's some just artificial signal, let's forget it, but she didn't. And that led to one of the biggest discoveries in astronomy in that time. Pulsars were discovered. It's the remnants of supernova stars, and nobody believed that things, okay, theoretically it was predicted, but nobody knew that it really exists. So, and all began with very faint signal and standing up to your supervisor who said no. So, how to find bravery to publish?
That's a good one. I always remember another story of Dan Shechtman, who was here like maybe 5 years ago or something. Maybe also open readings. Nobel Prize laureate, and I don't know, for those who don't know him, okay. So he discovered quasi-crystals, the things which have like
Everybody
C5
was laughing at him.
Yeah, that was some real bravery. When I heard the stories, what he was telling, that he comes to American Chemical Society conference, and he gives his talk, and another very famous person, Linus Pauling, stands up and then he starts shouting, "Get the hell out! Get this guy the hell out of here! He's talking nonsense. He should stop." And he still managed to stand, and like he was going around, and he said he was really disappointed, and like he started disbelieving himself. But at the end of the day, it turned out to be true. So I think, yeah, it's the same as trying. Like when you think about the career and you're not sure, there's nothing wrong about trying. I think everybody has to keep that in mind. And the fact that we have more choices these days, what Kishan just mentioned, is helpful. You know, if you don't like it, there's nothing bad. If you don't find your passion, just leave, try something else. There's nothing bad about it. I think if it doesn't, sometimes people manage to find their passion. They start off very skeptically. I've seen people, and then they really find their passion on the way, on the journey. It happens as well. So there's nothing wrong about trying, and there's nothing wrong about failing. There's nothing wrong about being down, and the question about science and nature.
I can put my question the other way around. If you publish something and then it turns out to be nonsense.
There's nothing wrong about that. I always tell my students, errata, corrigenda, that's a sign of good science. When people publish errata to their papers, that's a sign of very good science. There's nothing wrong about it. You correct yourself. You can't correct yourself. Science is like a living thing, you know. You constantly improve it. I'm a proponent of a future publishing model where you can update your paper on the fly. I wouldn't mind such a model at all. Like you keep updating, you hear people commenting. There's nothing wrong about that, definitely.
Yeah, I really like what Linus has just said. You know, in life, we are really taught to avoid failure. We hate failure. We do everything we can to do things that we succeed at. But in fact, it's only through failure that you actually achieve great things. So you hear about the great scientists of the past, like Schrödinger said Schrödinger said we would never see a single atom. He said, you can read books of all these people, Einstein as well. You saw today's Brownian diffusion theory. He just rearranged it. You can see immediately in undergraduate that it cannot exist for a single particle. He said, it doesn't matter. So people say things, but as Linus says, we're all learning all the time. If you're scared to fail, you're not going to live, basically, in any part of your life. So you should embrace failure, but you must come from a point of integrity, congruence, and say, look, I've done this experimental theory the best I can. Here's my assumptions. Here's what I have. And that's why we have peer review. And you're right. Sometimes there will be something that fell in the crack, and that's okay. But, you know, as Newton said, if I have seen very far, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. Okay, so in other words, many people are doing things together, and sometimes it's the person at the pinnacle who maybe wins the Nobel Prize or finds a discovery or whatever. But that person would not have done it if other men and women below them in this pyramid had not done the things to support that, and we can all see that. So please don't be scared of failure, but do things to the best of your ability. But don't be scared to put yourself out there. You have to. Otherwise, it's being what you are and being true to yourself and getting feedback, and that's the way the system works.
Okay, how do you deal personally with rejection? Every scientist, everyday problem. I wrote the best paper there is, and the referee thinks that it is not good. How do you deal it? It's always a hit.
It's a very good idea to try and to submit it to a better journal. It sometimes works. So you use the comments that were said in the rejection, improve your paper, and then just submit it to a better journal. And if that's rejected again, you can submit it to even better. So yeah, you might even get a good deal out of it.
This is the principle of Professor Juotkas's. He'll be giving talk tomorrow.
I just had a funny story last week. I think one of our papers got rejected, and there are two types of rejections. I like the rejections which are like based on something, and sometimes people really like, maybe sometimes it's wrong assumptions or something, but they write very detailed, comments. And last week one of our papers got rejected by saying not interesting, period. So those I'm getting a little bit mad about. And I would like to publish those. I would like those comments to be public.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. So some of the journals now are publishing the referee's comments as well. And just what you just said is exactly what happened. I didn't talk about this. We had a paper creating a wave meter from speckle. And the paper was rejected, and we changed it a little bit, and then we got a 3-page report saying, this is the most groundbreaking paper I've read in 5 years. And that was in Nature Communications or something. So you can do that. But rejection is part of the system, and it's objective. You could send the same paper to another journal and get great comments. On another day, it could go to another journal, you get bad ones. So in a way, what you've just got to say is, at least if the person is having some perspective and it's not personal, ask yourself, what can I learn from these comments? What can I do that's constructive? Because we all face rejection and setbacks in all parts of our lives, but it's the way we deal with them, instead of putting the blame on the referee or a family member or somebody outside or whatever. Try and think what you can do, so long as there is something constructive coming back to you. Because otherwise, that's what I try to do as a group leader. Because you can imagine all my group, they say, "Oh, Kishan, we got rejected. This." I say, "Don't worry. If you have a lemon, make lemonade." That's what they say with this phrase. So that try and be positive, but you do need constructive feedback.
I've read once that never answer the referee the same day you got the rejection.
The editor. The editor.
Okay, but usually in the letter you discuss with the referee.
You need to pause, right? Like everything. Your first reaction sometimes is a knee-jerk anger reaction, so it's kind of nice to be a little calmer about things and reflect. So we all need time to reflect on something that hasn't gone right for us.
Okay. You mentioned you had a very, let's say, good supervisor who inspired you. Can you elaborate to tell us a little bit about her or him? I don't know.
Yeah, sure. So he's a very religious guy, had a lovely family, but he had lots of 3 young children. So when I was a PhD student, little children, of course, they're very ill a lot. So he was at home a lot. Then he got injured. But I would phone him up and I'd have some derivation. I said, I found a factor of 2, this book is wrong. And of course the book wasn't wrong, but he would indulge me. So in other words, he would listen to every line of my working and say, scan it, send it to me, that's no problem. That's what I loved. He gave me time. Time is the biggest commodity on this planet. And I realized that when he gave me time, he inspired me because I thought he's listening to me. And then because of that, I was inspired without him saying anything to do more in the lab. And then things started working, and it was great. And I did things and he was super happy. So he inspired me by giving me time and just being available for me. And that was something that I hadn't really seen at that level before from other people. And that inspired me. I thought, I want to do this. I want to inspire young people, help them think through science, think through ideas. And that's what really did it for me. Then I thought, this is a great job. It's exciting. In that way, and that's why I probably stayed in science.
Okay, may I ask a provocative question now from the audience? There are no many professors around.
Don't be afraid.
Those who are, please close your eyes. Could you please raise hands, those who are not happy with your supervisors? At least once.
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
It's going going online.
It's on YouTube.
It's going online.
We shall cut.
You have to be careful these days with social media.
So everyone's happy because when you read, I don't know, on internet, on Facebook, you can see many and many complaints about relations between PhD student or master student and the supervisors. There are even threats like, okay, he suppresses me, he doesn't understand, or he demands to work a lot, to put too many hours. Okay, now it's not the issue here, obviously, but what would you recommend to those young scientists who are not happy with supervisor? Just, okay, the most simple answer would be change, but how to deal?
Choosing the right supervisor is the most important thing before you start your PhD. That I can say. It's more important than choosing the right topic.
But it's the same like, in marriage, but if you missed. And according to statistics, half population misses.
And you can divorce. It's no big deal. You can marry second time, third time. And at the end of the day, people find sometimes the right person.
Okay.
So I think in the UK, I don't know how the system is here. So what we have is a mentor. Everybody in the university who's a PhD student has another supervisor who's not in the project. And that person you can go and talk to. Ultimately, all of these things come down to communication. All right, so a lot of times when things break down, it's because people aren't talking for one reason or another, and they feel resentment, or they feel they can't talk. If you're not talking to your supervisor, or you feel unhappy, he or she has said to do. So for example, I never tell my group to do long hours. I would like them to do whatever hours they like. I never tell them to come in at 9 o'clock. But what I do tell them is, I've got this block of work, and I know from my experience it should take approximately this length of time. It doesn't matter, and I'm available for them, really, even outside hours. They don't have to be, but I am. And so that's how I do it. So I try to make them feel supported. Now, if the person doesn't feel supported, I always say, if you want, we can ask somebody to come in. And if you feel like that, you can say that to your supervisor. You can say, you have a viewpoint, I have a viewpoint. Is there another person in my department who we could talk to resolve this? That's very reasonable. It's very reasonable, and you shouldn't be scared to say that because it's your future. Supervisors usually have a permanent job. You would like to advance your career, and if you feel you're not getting ahead, you should speak up. Okay? And there's usually, I don't know if the system in Lithuania is like, has that kind of mentoring. No?
Not really.
So we do that regularly. So that's a very good idea you could do in your department, and we have to have that. Many people have two supervisors anyway, especially if they're doing something interdisciplinary, materials and physics or chemistry or biology, and you have another supervisor who is a person you have to see every 6 months minimum, usually every 3, and you just say, how is it going? Have you meet your supervisor? I think that's something you should maybe introduce here. It just gives the student a bit of confidence there's someone to talk to, and I think that's extremely important when things go wrong. So that's something I would suggest as a way to do it. But the first point is, if you're unhappy, talk to your supervisor, but please try and find somebody else in the department, another professor who maybe can assist, who's close to the work or something.
This question was from our experience. We had a conflict not that long ago, something like last year. It was a really big conflict between supervisor and the student just before the defense, and it got quite, intense because, and the problem is in Lithuania sometimes that all the department is very closely, everyone knows each other, and it's difficult to find for students especially someone who would be really objective and not a friend of your supervisor.
Can I ask, how was that resolved?
Civil. No, that person defended the PhD, but it took, it was taken to the higher level and was done officially with commissions and things like that. It wasn't very pleasant procedure, but still it was resolved. But my question also was keeping that in mind, that the conflict was brewing for some time. I believe that the student wasn't happy with the supervisor and vice versa from the very beginning. But it was like, idea just to, okay, I will wait, I'll do this PhD, it's not for that long, it's only 4 years and something like that. So what would be your suggestion just in real life situation, just to change the supervisor as soon as possible, to go to complain to someone, or just to let it go and maybe get this?
I would not advise anybody to let it go for 4 years. That's too long. I would say most problems, whether they're in your family or in career, we know how it is. If you don't talk, it just goes up and up and up. Misunderstanding and tension. And that's what happens. The earlier you address a problem, the better it is in any part of your life. We all know that. But it's very hard to do. So I would suggest in that situation, if the student, he or she had talked to the supervisor earlier, maybe in the department it might have been resolved at an early stage. They could have found a way out. Maybe you can ask somebody in another department to intervene who doesn't know the supervisor. But there has to be a mechanism here to do that, because what is the point in having 2 unhappy people spend 4 years of their lives and then to probably end up with a position where the student he or she does not wish to stay in science, the supervisor gets a reputation. Everybody here knows about this story, obviously, or it's not productive or constructive for anybody. So I would say somebody higher up should have a mechanism to help at least start a discussion, but please start early. Like anything in life, if you leave a problem too long, then it can only get worse.
Communication. Do it via email, do it via phone, do it via Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want. I mean, communication is the best way to resolve things, and try to talk as much as you can. Try to be open. Try your supervisor to become open. Try to find the points which are where the conflict starts, or where you don't agree, and try to polish those things. That's my suggestion.
I would also like to add that sometimes, in some cases, it might be even that the student himself should also think of him. Is he really right in this situation, or maybe just like he can easily resolve this problem, and maybe he's taking things too serious. For example, sometimes I hear students that complain for very obvious things, like, oh, supervisor tells me to work, to be in the lab in working hours, but I want to rest or something. So yeah, well, you should work, and it seems that as if you should work, but so sometimes I think that it is students' fault, but of course not always. Sometimes, yeah. So, and if you really think that you are right, then yeah, of course I agree with everyone that communication is very important.
So summing up, do something about that as soon as possible. As openly as possible. And I told about one example, but I know, for example, a friend of mine, he already had PhD, I'm telling, thesis on his hand, and he didn't defend. It was long ago, a good friend of mine, just because of the conflict with the supervisor. In fact, 2 of my friends, and bright ones. I couldn't tell that the theses were bad of theirs. They were among the brightest among those, let's say, year-end students, but they had some conflicts and resolved issues, and they piled up till the end, and it led to unpleasant results. It's like spending 4 or 5 years without finishing and going to business and things like that. Okay. I want to move a little bit to another topic, which is also important, very, very important for young persons in science. Does parenting interfere with the scientific career? I would add, of course it does. How do you deal with that?
Does everybody have children?
Well, as a mother, I can say in the beginning it really does a lot. For example, when you go to the maternity leaves, then you have to leave all the work and you have to think about other person and you kind of forget all the work. And however, from my experience, in the very beginning when my son was born, I managed also to publish one paper, to write a paper, but it was due to the fact that in the beginning the child was very calm and slept a lot, so I was carrying him, and yeah. It was quite hard to get back to work because before I was used to work like whenever I want. I come to the lab not so early in the morning, but then I stay all day, I get the inspiration and I can stay up to night. And now it's like, you know, that you bring child to the kindergarten and go to work and you have to leave work when you have to take a child back from the kindergarten. So you have to to plan your time a lot. So on one hand, it's very hard because you might get inspiration in the evening, but then you have to go. But on the other hand, you just stop procrastinating because you sit and you say, okay, I have to work because I have this time, and then you plan everything and you think, oh, this weekend, I have to spend time with my son, so I will not have time to finish this paper. So then you just sit and write it so I got even sometimes, during some days, even more productive during the day. And so less late hours working at night. And the hardest part was probably writing a PhD thesis, because it's like when you get into it, and if the writing process is very nice and very smooth, it's very you don't want to go from work and stop it, because next day you're not gonna manage to start it all over again. So it's also very important to have people who help you, whether it's a husband, a wife, or parents, or anyone who during your evenings or weekends could take care of a child and could help you. So
I guess Akvile has the most experience. Just listen up. I'm just performing an experiment now for about 4 months, so we'll see. Ask me in a year. So I can only say that the amount of sleep hours dropped by about half. That's about it.
I just want to say, I have somebody, so in my group, we had a postdoc, she had a baby. So what I did was I paired her up with a PhD student, so she could they could both continue the work, and she felt somebody was, via Skype, was just continuing and keeping the project going. And she found that very useful to overcome some of the things we've heard about. So it was like a support. So she understood, of course, she couldn't spend the time. Obviously, she was on maternity leave, but she didn't want the big lull. The student was very happy. This student had another project, but they have a joint piece of work, and that has worked very well. And that meant that she felt there was continuity, and she's returning now, and she feels like the project has progressed. So you can talk about restructuring things in your group if you have a group of that size. So in my group, that's why I particularly make sure everybody's not in a silo. They kind of work together as a team. And so sometimes if someone is on maternity, I offer that. It doesn't have to be taken, but it's a way that for some of the issues you particularly mentioned, a mother can feel that she's still in touch and things are progressing a little bit, and that gives her the support so that there's not a big sort of binary drop in the productivity during that time. So there are ways you can think about this to support each other, but that's what it comes down to, because family life, or we might have to care also for a relative, anything could happen. It's very important to take that into account.
Akvile, do you believe that it is more difficult for women? At least, let's say, okay, in Lithuania.
Well, I would think that it's probably more difficult for women because women have to take the maternity leave, or at least, well, they give birth for a child, they have to recover. It also depends if a woman decides to breastfeed baby or give formulas, yeah, because if you breastfeed, then again, you have to, it's very hard, you sleepless nights, and then you have to spend lots of time at home and cannot come back to work very soon. So in the beginning, I think that it's a bit more difficult for women, but when child grows, I think it depends on the partner, because in my case, I'm very happy because we share with my husband like the care, and sometimes he works late because he's also a scientist. So sometimes he works late, sometimes I work late, and it's very good to have a like good, reliable partner whom you can like share this work. So to sum up, when the child is older, I think it's both.
And just taking from our previous discussion, if your partner is not so good, change him.
Like 4 or 5 years.
But you lose the support for a while. You know? You have to take that into account.
Okay. I also was wondering, I'll ask very, let's say, bluntly and straight, and I think now men should keep silent, but do we have gender issues, gender problems in science in Lithuania? How do you feel? All the time I was convinced that we don't, but it's me.
When we started to study physics, we had 80 guys and 8 girls. That was certainly a problem.
For guys.
In chemistry, it was skewed to the other side.
Why don't you ask how many of the women in the audience would like the academic career? That would be interesting to see.
How many women would like academic career from the audience? Could you please raise hand, those who consider staying in science?
Nobody.
Oh, I see a few hands, but very, very, you know, like shaking hands, thinking what?
From the guys, how many would like? So this is much more, right? No. Something
Science, PhD, then science, postdoc.
kind of academic as a possibility, doesn't it? It's not going.
I believe you
No, post PhD. Let's.
I imagine that PhD is the beginning of scientific career, in fact. I am convinced that there is no point in going to PhD. I will be shouted at now. There is no point in going into PhD if you really do not intend to go to science. Okay, at least to R&D department in business. But if you are planning to go to cell, it's obviously no point losing 4 years. It's my personal opinion.
But R&D department in the industry is not academic.
Yes.
Very big distinction.
Yeah, but sometimes I heard at least for several times that those are very happy. They said, okay, I am doing the very same thing I was doing in university, only for much higher salary. So, and they also publish.
Thank you very much. So about this topic of R&D and the privatization of knowledge, and one thing that I want to ask you is somehow I think that most of us think about researchers as these priests of science. So you have to put a lot effort and a lot into that, and sometimes you have to throw away some things, or this is the idea, at least this is the general idea. Yesterday I was talking with Professor Moreau, and he told me, like, yes, you really need to love this to continue to do this. And I was talking with him, and now I'm listening more to Professor Kishan, and you both are from places which are scientific havens, but for example, if you come from other countries in Europe or the rest of the world which cannot give so many opportunities in science, it's hard. You have to do a lot. I have friends of mine that are older than me. They had to go to Australia, to other places, so they could really enjoy their creativity and everything. And so this creates this thing. For example, I think that most of my older friends go to the private sector, so to companies, into the R&D department, and this I think it creates this problem with privatization of knowledge. And as you can see right now, big companies in North America, they have a lot of knowledge in their hands. You can see that by IBM in the quantum information systems. And so what can this academic life do to counterbalance this tendency of going into private sector because of better wages, and sometimes because you don't have to leave your own country to do that? I understand this passion that you have to go to science, and it's really beautiful because it's an open knowledge world, and you can just share it to the world. And but somehow, if this scale is getting unbalanced and people are going more to the private sector, what can the academic life do to raise more hands in the audience when they ask if someone wants to be a researcher?
I could probably answer that in part, at least, that science, it has a privilege of public money. That's why there is some different, let's say, flavor to the work in R&D and in science. They might be working on similar problem, but once I heard from a R&D girl from, I don't quite recall now, Osram, I believe, she said that I greatly enjoy my job, but I hate one particular aspect of it. The very day when somebody else discovers what I'm doing, the project is being cancelled and you are forced to move other direction. In business it's very strict. They are going after money, after results, after products. And in science you have liberty to work on whatever you like. In fact, it's like that. The freedom is much bigger in science. And also usually, in my experience at least, I work in characterization of semiconductors. Universities usually have much better equipment than companies. That's true. Very few companies want to invest into the multi-million equipment, characterization equipment that is intended to discover things, to go deeper into the processes. And really large companies sometimes collaborate with us asking to measure something because we don't have equipment. Like example, 3 camera. In our world it's like everyday equipment, it's basics, but few companies have those. They are expensive. So could you add something to that comment?
So I agree with a lot of what's just said. So you're right, and in companies like Google or Apple or something, they will sweep up people, but you won't feel as an individual. If you discover something, it would just be Tim Cook or somebody saying what's happened, or Google says they've discovered blank, or an algorithm to do this. And so the beauty about what we do is you can get individual credit. You can drive it forward in the way you want, so you have a kind of freedom that I think you won't have. I agree the wages may likely be better in Google or obviously or in Apple, but money isn't everything. Money is just a vehicle to buy. It doesn't give you happiness in some way, many ways, right? So as we all know. So that's something you have to balance. And as you rightly say, in the UK anyway, many companies use universities because of their clean rooms. facilities. So we have new types of grants, I can tell you, in the UK. And for example, we have a new grant where I get a lot of money, and the company just has to pay some people, and we can work together in the university. And they have to send people to the university. This is good, because then we can work on shared problems, but they don't owe me anything, I don't owe them, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. That's a good kind of model. So it depends what you like, but I think going back to my viewpoint is you feel more individual and have more freedom to operate in academia than you do in any company and in its R&D vehicle.
And don't forget that academic job gives you that freedom to travel around the world. It's one of the very few jobs where you can be anywhere you want. Academic world is the most open world, in a sense, you know.
It's called scientific tourism.
It has a negative connotation. You don't have to be a scientific tourist to do science. So don't forget that, you know, academia is the most open field of society, one of the most open fields of society. You can easily get a job being a Russian or a Polish or a Lithuanian, a professor job in the United States or the United Kingdom or for that matter, anywhere, you know, Australia. It's the opportunity that you can get that job, I think. So there's nothing really bad about that you can travel. It's not that you have to travel. And just to add to Ramuna's what he mentioned was that, yeah, the R&D spending, for example, in the United States is increasing, but whatever you measure the innovation with is decreasing in industry currently. The industry stopped, especially large corporations stopped to innovate. They would rather outsource, take the IP, and that's how they commercialize the R&D. The innovation stopped at large corporations, and due to the fact that there's a lot of consolidation, mergers and acquisitions in the high-tech industry, I think that is going to continue for a while. So there's going to be less and less interesting research done in industry. That's my opinion. Less and less innovation done in industry.
I would also like to add that there will be always people who stay in academia because, as the professor mentioned before, some people just don't feel happy when they work for industry because they don't have this freedom. So there is not, I think, much to worry about it, because some people, they just want to have this simple job that they can go and work in some company. Some people are creative and need creative job, but they don't need freedom. They need more money, so then they can work in the company's R&D. And still, many people need this freedom and be happy to do what they do and share it with other people.
I can add two things. First one, since we are talking about living beings, don't forget about stress. In industry, I've read once that the average time span of one working in Google now is something like 1 year and 2 months. So it means that you are doing the best job in your life. It's very shining, but it's for 1 year only. Then you will be changed. And the same for, I believe it's the same trend for all large corporative business in the United States, at least. I forgot the second. Which brings me maybe to the last question, the last topic maybe of this discussion, and it would be how many times you wanted to quit science. I am talking about those, let's say, dark days when you say, okay, enough is enough, I'm quitting, I'm going to do something else. I had those moments, especially when I needed money. I went to business. I lasted 6 months, sorry, not years. I said, no, I'm going back. Like you said, it's something like 50% cut in salary, doesn't matter. But I can't work with people who doesn't understand Gaussian distribution, and I can talk about Gaussian distribution during lunch. It's nonsense. But did you have those dark moments when thinking about changing your career?
I don't have much experience, but from the very beginning, when I was studying bachelor or master thesis or master degree, I thought that it's nice to stay in science, and then I started PhD, and I also never thought of quitting. And then those dark thoughts when you write thesis, it's like every day, oh, why I'm here? I shouldn't have done that, and it's like constantly. And when I defended it, it's also the day before the defense, it was also like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I should quit, and then you do it, and all those thoughts are gone again. So it's just yeah, before the defense.
Yes. And I also quit.
Thinking right now, yes.
What I want to say, there's also nothing bad about quitting, and think that there's always, if you really want, there's always one tiny route somewhere to come back. If you really want to come back, you can also come back. And I think in the future it's going to be also academia, it will change into a more flexible system in a way that people will move between sectors more. That's my belief in the future. Due to globalization, due to the fact that, yeah, industry is doing more and more collaboration with academia. So there's nothing bad about it. You can always go back and forth, and I think that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only time I thought about quitting was when I had my first postdoc, and I didn't. I was rejected at 4 places on the go. I came to big institutions. They had 150 applicants. I came second twice. So that was really, I remember getting drunk and thinking this is the end, you know. And I applied to be a teacher, primary school teacher as well at that time. But you know, you just stick with it. And after that, though, even if I don't get grants or anything now, I still want to stay because, you know, you are your own boss. It's very, certainly in the UK, it's actually, however bad the economic situation gets, universities don't collapse. They're still there, right? We've got young people, they want to study. We live in a global environment. So in a way, a university career can be a job for life. A job in Google and Apple, just as we heard, it can burn out, you get kicked around, and you have no say. If you travel, you're your own boss. I really wanted to stick it out. But sure, you have bad days, but you've just got to be, in life, in a way, you've got to enjoy the journey and have a number of outcomes that you'd be happy with, because you don't know. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And that's a good way to, if you get too fixated on one outcome and it doesn't happen, you can get very unhappy and upset with yourself. So enjoy the journey, but yes, of course we all have our dark moments, and but you know, you've just got to be positive.
I want to second you about the stability of the job. I have job contract till 2041. It's no joke, really. I have written it here. I keep forgetting now. I know when I retire. I can always check.
Very hard to say in this day and age.
I was wondering, where did you get that card from with such a number? Mine says 2021.
Our administration is better then. Do you have some questions or topics you would like?
Yeah, I'm maybe more interested in this living in between. Most of the time when we speak with our colleagues, with our renowned professors, it seems that to be a good scientist, you must go all the way. And what I mean, you have to sacrifice a lot of your spare time, a lot of time with your families. And I'm, in principle, asking, do you think, is it true? Have you also experienced this, that You have to suffer the time, sacrifice the time with your family. And maybe the second part, how much free time do you have now? And what do you do in this free time?
Yeah, as I told before, yeah, so I had to sacrifice a lot of time with my family when I was writing a thesis. Also, when I went to internship to Portugal, so it was for 1 month. I've never been this long way from my son, so I thought that's gonna be very hard. But it turned out to be a very good holiday for him because, like, in the middle of internship, my husband and son came to visit me. So, good destination. So they both visited Portugal. So it turned out very good in the end. And yeah, sometimes but I think that is also in any other job that you have. There's also some point that you have to sacrifice your time. You will still have to work during weekends or evenings. It happens, I think, in every work. And what about free time? So when you manage your time, I think you can also get free time. And personally, me, I do sports. So I like to do sports. I try to do it 3 times a week. And because afterwards I even feel better and have more energy. And when you have better health, then you can concentrate and you go back to work more happy. Because when you sit all the day, it's very good to move a bit. The next day you feel very good. So that's how.
That's a good question. My experience says that a lot of people who would consider academia as a potential career path are very ambitious. So even if they are not in academia, they take very ambitious jobs in industry, banking, finances, or they become very ambitious teachers, I don't know what. And those jobs are also very demanding. The industry jobs are also very, very demanding, time-wise and energy-wise, and could be, in many cases, even more intense than academic jobs. It's just that probably in academic job, you just need that little edge of creativity, a little bit more of creative push than in industry jobs. But for ambitious people, you will find that any job you take is going to be very, very demanding and very, very tough. Just don't forget that there are other things. Sports, family, friends, etc.
Yeah, so I would say academia is not a job. It is a paid hobby. Okay, so I would say that for me, it is being creative. So I like thinking about science outside. If you want a job that just, you start at 9 o'clock, you do whatever somebody else tells you, you go home at 5 o'clock and you don't think about it, this is not the job for you. Now, as we've already heard, there are many jobs. There's a very interesting article in the BBC. So I think, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but say the average salary in the UK is something like 30,000 euros. And then they said, what happens as your salary goes up in terms of your time? When are you most happy? What's the happiest salaries had? It's not the biggest salary. So they find that a salary of around 50,000 euros in the UK, or equivalent, is great. As soon as you go after that, it goes like this, because your responsibility and the amount of work you have to do to earn a salary of 70,000, 80,000, 100,000, it goes up kind of exponentially. Your responsibility and encroachment on other parts of your life outweighs your happiness. You don't have time to spend with friends. So they found that most people who had a salary of just 50,000 or something had enough time to spend with their friends and yet enough money to buy and do the things they wanted. So these are all things you have to weigh up. But I think it's great. I love creativity. It goes into other parts of my life. It's what keeps me alive. I don't want a job where I just do it to get money. I don't do academia to get money. I'm fortunate that I grew up at a time where academic jobs do pay reasonably now and good in the UK and elsewhere. I'm very lucky. At the time, my supervisor had a terrible salary. So in fact, that's something that's happened in the last 20 years. And 20 years ago, professors got paid a lot less than they do now, everywhere in the world, I would say. But yes, you have to balance these things out. But you can decide, if you're a professor or an academic, you can say, I published 1 paper this year. We don't have to publish 10. Why do some groups have 20 people? Ones have 2. It's okay. You again have freedom for that. You can call the shots. You're your own boss to a little bit of an extent. But yeah, so I love my free time too. I do cycling, walking, I play music, many things. But yeah, it's all part of the same thing. But this is not a job. I feel it's like a paid hobby.
Any more questions?
So you were talking about that academic freedom a lot, and as I imagine, it's a kind of thing when you do what you really like, what your ideas are around. So I wanted to ask, how do you achieve that academic freedom, and does always your scientific degree assure that?
By working hard. Once you have to reach a certain stage to get a certain degree of freedom, and that's just the way the world works currently. And of course, freedom is guaranteed by funding, by public funding for your hobby, for your paid hobby. So that's sort of the thing. If you can convince the public that this is what you want to do and they should pay for it, that's your freedom. And it can start earlier actually than you might think. You can get an independent scholarship for your PhD studies from Wellcome Trust or something like this. And that is a certain degree of freedom. You will have more freedom than people who are on some grant money or something. So it's like that. Or if you get an independent fellowship for a postdoc, you get more freedom, much more freedom. If you get a big grant, that's your freedom.
I believe your freedom begins now by choosing where to do PhD. The possibilities are great. Every country, I mean Western country I know, is hunting for PhD students. I believe I am not too wrong. You can easily go to States. Yeah. One of the best laboratories in the world has positions, open positions, and looking for PhD students. So I can't imagine better freedom, higher freedom than that to start with.
And Lithuania is the best at the moment, I think. We have the highest number of positions, the best position to student ratio.
That's also true, but I believe especially young students, they have to go abroad to see the world by themselves in order to believe our statement that in Lithuania now conditions are among the best. That's simply true, but you may think that I am doing propaganda and so.
Yeah, field experience.
You have to go to see by yourselves and then you'll return.
Believe it, right? You have to go through it sometime. As you rightly said. Go out. Come to Scotland.
The most beautiful country after Lithuania. I already told.
Come and find out.
Questions more?
So a short question regarding what you said about field experience being the best teacher. How does one know when to stop trying things out and instead settle on one particular research field? Because if you just flip-flop from one field to another, you can't really achieve anything. So.
A very fundamental question, I am afraid. Anyone?
Well, that's the way the world is at the moment. research is becoming more and more interdisciplinary, more collaboratory, more international, more globalized, more industrialized. And I think that's just the way it is. You have to move from one field to the other these days. It's just the way the funding system works. It's just the way current research system works. It's just the way it is. And I think, I mean, there's nothing bad. I mean, some of the biggest discoveries were made by people who's changed fields or come to a new field and they have new eyes and they just see the things differently, and all of a sudden, like they realize something where people thought for 30 years and they couldn't understand something, but just a different set of eyes, they just all of a sudden like explained some phenomenon or made a discovery. I don't see anything bad from changing fields quite often. There's nothing bad about that, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe some.
Yes, I would echo that. So I did quantum physics, then I did nonlinear optics. I was the first person to do anything bio at St Andrews. I didn't do biology at all at school, and yet we have papers in big biology journals. What really matters is if you understand principles. Because many people say physics is based on, and science is based on principles. If you understand them, you can go and transfer those principles from one field to another, and then ask the right questions and see with new eyes, or shake the foundation of a field. And you really must believe you can do that. I mean, in my group, I'm one of the things I'm most proud of is in one lab we have papers in high journals and highest quality data at the boundary with quantum physics, right through to imaging zebrafish, right through to playing with, we have different things right across the spectrum of optics. But it's only because we understand the principles that we can do that. It doesn't mean you have to do that, but I would embrace that. Embrace learning something new, because many people in science use different language to say the same thing. You'll have found that already, right? You say, oh, we call that this function in this, and you say, it happens all the time. And that way you can actually add something. So don't be scared, take a dip, go and look at new things, and you never know, something very exciting might happen.
On the other hand, it is the same like with marriage. At some point you have to choose.
Just a couple of more comments. I don't know how many of you heard about Professor John Goodenough, who is considered to be the father of lithium-ion batteries. And he had he's 97 and still working, had a very long career. And one of his longest stops and where he made his most important discoveries was at the University of Oxford. And before he was offered the position of professor of chemistry. And he actually studied mathematics in college and did his PhD in theoretical physics. I said, chemistry? I only had chemistry in high school the last time. I don't know what it is. Well, try. And he just took the position of a chemistry professor and made his biggest discoveries at the age of 54 or something. Another example is, I think, people who work in computational biology and molecular modeling. A lot of discoveries there, a lot of software was developed by people who were in late 80s, lost their jobs in particle physics and nuclear physics. And a lot of very talented people had to switch. And they just took up this biophysics, computational biology, did great things, wrote great software, made big discoveries. Just a couple of examples to illustrate how modern science works. There's nothing really bad. It's just great that people switch fields and bring new knowledge.
So I just want to ask, which are the main, the main tips that you can give to a young person that wants to engage in the scientific world? So if one wants to engage in a PhD or something, what are what were the mistakes that you did in the beginning, and what can we avoid if we go into.
I think somebody already mentioned, think very well what you want to do. Not that much about where you want to go and whether that place has a beach or not. Think more about what you really want to work on. Try to do as much research about your supervisor, what he's working on, what he's doing, what are his interests. Try to contact people who are working with him. Try to contact the postdocs, the other PhD students in the group. Just do your share of research. That's the most valuable thing. Think about it. Take your time.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, for example, when people come to join my group, I say, why don't you go for lunch and go for an evening out with the group without me, so they can actually talk informally, right? I think that's actually a very good sign. Talk, really go and meet, and if a person's really interested, it's a market economy. You can go and visit places, and people do that. Go and visit them and spend a weekend there. Or just spend a couple of days, see what the students like. You know, if you talk to enough people, you'll find out if they're happy or not, right? And that's what really, find out if people have gone away and then come back. Little things like that are really good telltale signs of whether a group is successful or not. Because on the surface, it's very hard to tell what life's like there. But talking to people around somebody is great. And if that person's got good credentials with other people, then you'll start to feel if it's a place you'd like to go.
So I would like to ask you, so what is the percentage of the time you actually spend doing like science? If you drop like project writing, report writing, giving lectures, whatever, what is the percentage of just you're doing science?
Does paper writing counts? Then a lot.
Still a lot.
Well, since I'm just just defended the thesis, so of course I did a lot, and this project writing didn't take much of my time. So most of the time that I spend, it's the research. Whether I search for papers and read to get new ideas, like to find some knowledge, or prepare papers, or spend time in the lab, or do data analysis. So, but still there is some also time that I spend not for science. But I would say maybe for me it's 70% that I do science, and this other 30% that I prepare for seminars or do some bureaucracy work. So.
May I share my own experience, let's say my own idea? In fact, if you measure the real time, physical time that you spent on these bureaucratic works, it is not large. It's really small. But this time is so nasty that thinking about those tasks you will be doing in 1 month takes a lot of energy, and they're just very unpleasant jobs. That's why they are so much visible, and it's not that much, in fact. But again, it's my personal opinion.
I can also only attest personally. I'm still starting, and I'm in transition, starting a group, and so I still do a lot of research, still going to the lab, and probably most of the time still goes into research.
Yes, I would agree with what you've just said there, that sometimes the task, it's the thinking about it that makes you unhappy, and you lose time because you're just not motivated to do anything at those periods when you're thinking too hard about a bad task you have to do. I spend a lot of my time writing grants, but some grants have a lot of admin text, but also writing grants helps you learn science. It focuses your ideas, it forces you to read widely, it makes you very sharp in what you know other people have done and not done. It galvanizes your ideas, so I still call that science. So I would say I still spend 40% of my time, I would say, doing things, either paper writing. I don't have much time to get into the lab really anymore, but I'd still spend time with people having meetings about the science, or maybe looking through code with them or something. So I still spend 40%, and that's what keeps me going. But you're absolutely right that the negative things in life take up. It's just they cloud your mind, and they take up an abnormal amount of time just because of the thinking behind them, and the dread of them as much as the actual activity.
In my department now, everyone's freaking out about intermediate report, which is due in 1 month. Just a report for national projects, and it will take like 1 day writing, but now 1 month in advance, everyone's unhappy and You have more questions? I see none. So let us thank our speakers. Thank you for participating.